You are so going to enjoy this next moderator. Bobby Pittman is a panel Olympian. You may already have seen several of the panels he's already moderated so far for this symposium. Officially, he's the managing partner of Kupanda Capital, but he also says, "Don't let myself be constrained by a title." His moderating style, he always does the same thing, magic. The adjective he uses for his panels, epic. And he also promised you that this will be the best session of the day. Talk about setting the bar high. Bobby Pittman, we can't wait to see this panel. More seconds of applause, please.
I said all those things in confidence last night, I felt like, and it was. That's okay. Okay, we're going to do full transparency. Well, great. No, we do have a very exciting panel. Just like I was saying earlier today, kind of really differentiated experiences, differentiated focuses. Hopefully we can have, blend them together and have some interesting points arise. I'm going to refrain from introductions just to help with the conversation. I know we have full bios. Obviously, Kwame, you've already been introduced. Yeah. Kwame, the report talks about youth inclusive transformation, and that's a little bit what we want to talk about today. How do you think about that phrase, how it's been used in the report, how we should even kind of calibrate our conversation?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that question. So we advocate for a youth inclusive transformation, but we do recognize that it's not just youth inclusive does not mean youth alone. We recognize that youth, the challenges that young people face is part of systemic challenges. And until you address those systemic challenges, young people's livelihood will not be able to improve, independent of that systemic challenges. So what we actually are saying there is the youth inclusive transformation will have four main elements. And the first one is seeking to address all the systemic challenges that constrain agricultural productivity growth. So if you address those challenges, you create opportunities for everyone, including the young people that are part of it. The second aspect of it is looking at harnessing and also maximizing some of the strength that young people may bring to the transformation process. So we talked about young people's affinity to the use of technology. So, and technology is going to be key if agriculture is going to meet those challenges that are ahead of it. And young people could be a conduit for introducing those technologies to agriculture. And then the third aspect of it is looking at, we also need to address some youth-specific challenges. Some of them might be sociocultural or institutional that limit youth access to certain kinds of resources. So we need to address that. And the last piece, which I feel is also important, is the need to empower those young people to be part of the conversation and shape the solutions that we are addressing. So make sure that young people's voices is heard in the decision-making process, so that whatever solution we are going to come up with will align with the vision that they have for themselves. So that is, in a nutshell, what we were advocating for in the report.
No, it's a really helpful framing. Ariane Campbell, I want to come to you. You manage the Youth Livelihoods program at Mastercard Foundation, focused on a lot of these skills, gaps, or opportunities that Kwame is talking about. Can you talk a little bit about the background of the program, the reasoning, and maybe even share a couple things that you've witnessed and learned in that process?
Sure, yes, thank you for the question. So the Youth Livelihoods program was started in 2010, and its goal is to equip economically disadvantaged out-of-school young people in Africa with the right tools, skills, and knowledge to not only access economic opportunities, but also to expand the economic opportunities available to them, and also to become leaders in their community. So since 2010, we've partnered on 28 projects in 18 African countries. We've committed over $450 million, and about half of that has been in the agricultural sector, and reached over 3.1 million young people. So we pursue a holistic model, and what that means is, in addition to providing market-relevant technical training, we also integrate things like soft skills, life skills, entrepreneurial skills, financial literacy. We try to include always hands-on components, so internships, apprenticeships, and also things like mentorship, coaching, business development services, because approximately 90% of our investments are in the self-employment space. And the reason why we pursue a holistic model is we've found discrete interventions are just often not enough. Doing one kind of training is just going to spur a young person to other needs in their livelihood journey. So, for example, you can't just provide business development services without also access to finance, and you can't provide technical skills for the job market if there's not the soft skills to find those jobs and keep those jobs. And what we found with the holistic model is that it's not only meaningful in helping youth transition to sustainable livelihoods, but there's also these great knock-on effects. So I'll give one example of a partnership we have in Ethiopia with the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, and that program is focused on bringing young people into the silk and honey value chains. So as I mentioned, it follows the holistic model. In particular, it sets up youth cooperatives to not only do production in these areas, but build agribusinesses, and through that links them to skills, to mentorships, to markets. And we've seen sort of the direct effects. So the program has trained over 3,000 young people. It's poised to train thousands more. And we've seen them grow businesses in this area, earning, saving. But there's also a number of really amazing wider effects. So one example is in the beekeeping value chain in Ethiopia. It's traditionally been very male-dominated, and that's because traditionally the hives were hung far from the home on high trees, and the honey was collected at night. So this excluded young women. But the program has not only actively engaged young women, it's also provided things like modern and appropriate technologies. So protective equipment so one can gather honey in the day, and modern apiaries so that beehives can be kept close to the home. And we've seen not only young women entering these value chains, but really becoming trailblazers in their community and having all these knock-on effects. There's become a massive market for inputs to these value chains, so we're seeing all this work for young carpenters in making the silk rearing trays. And there's been an influx of bees into the area, so supporting the farmers' yields. So what we found with the holistic model is that it's not only just about bringing young people into meaningful livelihoods, but also supporting them in becoming leaders in their community.
No, it's there's a lot to take in from those examples, some of which I want to come back on. But before we do, let's kind of keep rounding out. Pop, I was just trying to look for what I'm supposed to call you, an entrepreneur czar, or like we're big on that here.
Yeah.
If you're in the White House and you have a specialty, I think we call you a czar. That's the thing. I'm not sure that's always good, but that's the term we use. Certainly exciting your appointment to your position in Senegal. You and I mean, as long as we're doing the transparency thing, you and I were talking backstage, commiserating and joking about our own experiences in institutional structures across Africa and the age challenges and the challenges for young people working in institutions, which I'm not sure is also not true here in the U.S., maybe just to a different degree. So quite excited about your appointment. How do you see now from your new position some of those priorities, both just on entrepreneurship, but also on kind of youth entrepreneurship, specifically in Senegal, although your experiences span far beyond Senegal?
Thanks, Bobby. I would like to thank the audience, first of all, and the Chicago Council for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would say this is my first international speech since I was appointed by President of Senegal, Macky Sall, in last December. The President decided to create a delegation for entrepreneurship for youth and women, which is placed at his own office. So as a Delegate General, I have a rank of a minister and I have a cross-sector view across different ministries in terms of financing for entrepreneurs. And as you were saying about the age issue, when they appointed me, I was 38, and some of the folks at the government told the president, "Are you crazy, appointing a young man, giving him $50 million a year to take care of entrepreneurs? He'll run away from it." So
you're here with the money.
Yes.
And we're all your friends now.
So I actually think, Bobby, you've been at the AFDB, and you have realized how hierarchy is very important in some of the African cultures. And it's the same in Senegal. So, but if you look at the demographics, youth represent more than 50% in most of the African countries. In Senegal, it represents around 56%. And women is composed of around 60% of that. So the president realized, despite several projects and programs that have been put in place for youth employment and women employment, that there are still things that were missing. And then he decided to create this delegation, which will have the opportunity to fund young entrepreneurs. But as Ariane was saying, we will have this time an innovative way of doing things. We will have not only financing for the youth and women, but also we'll have coaching for them. We will give them programs that help them sustain their business, where financial literacy, trainings, capacity building, but also we'll try to create value chains to try to propose markets for them to export the products they produce. Agriculture is good, we're talking about it, will be one of the key sectors I'll be investing in. We'll have 4 to 5 sectors. Agriculture will have more than 30% of the funds. Agriculture in big A, fisheries, livestock, and we will go in rural areas and the outskirts of Dakar, find young entrepreneurs that are already investing in agriculture or that are interested in going back to agriculture, because we have to, Senegal have an economy that is composed of 30% of agriculture in terms of the GDP. So our objective is to give those young people and those women the capacity to invest in their projects, but also to try to get markets to export. Just to give you a couple of figures in terms of agriculture productivity in Senegal, over the last 5 years, the president have established 2 key projects. The one which is a program for return to agriculture and the intensification and modernization of agriculture have resulted over the last 5 years to 342,000 direct and indirect jobs in rural areas for youth. And it also have increased by 160% for rice production and 436 tons of onions and potatoes. Just to show you that if you put resources, you put equipment, you modernize the sector, it will have impact, right? So I want to pursue that mission for, one, create more jobs for youth by financing, but also retain them home, because a lot of the migration issues we're seeing is that those people leaving rural areas coming to urban areas or Europe or US because they lack jobs, and also create a kind of stability in the country. And lastly, we will use technology a lot in order to reach those goals. As Ariane was saying, we met people from Mastercard Foundation a couple of weeks ago in Senegal, and my former colleagues at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working together to establish a platform that will allow us to have direct contact with the youth and the women with no intermediaries, because most of the time the resources don't get to the people. This time, we will identify all of them, we transfer the money to them, so with e-agriculture, we will be able to meet the goals and reach the maximum of people in the rural areas.
Great, very exciting. You know, Linda, so we've had kind of, you know, Kwame talking a little bit about the framework, which I think is both engagement, but also support. Ariane talking a little more about some of the support, some of their lessons learned, and now Pop talking about kind of this vision of support for the entrepreneurs. You know, you're a successful young entrepreneur, and also work with a lot of farmers. I'm sure across the spectrum. So you kind of have both vantage points. I think it'd be interesting to hear from you just some of your own reflections on your success. What were some of the things that were important in that process, and what were some of the obstacles? And I'm sure there still are some obstacles. That'd be interesting to hear from you.
Well, everyone can hear me. So I would say what actually helped us to get this far and helped me as an entrepreneur to get this far is because I did not know the challenges that were there. I mean, we started at home when I was pretty young. I was in my 4th year of university, and we just thought we can solve the world problems just by mobile technology and solutions, because that was what I was studying at the time. Anyway, fast track. One of the other things that have actually supported me in entrepreneurship is an enabling environment.
Yep.
And I know we've seen all these hubs, all these incubators that are coming up, but I will also try to say mentorship is what got me this far. I remember my 4th year professor really pushed me to the limit to see how I will be able to, how do I say, integrate M-Pesa. So it's a mobile money. How will I integrate mobile money into the application that I was building for my 4th year project? And it really pushed me far. And some of those lessons is what I carried into my business. Sorry. So what I was telling Pittman is what helped me was mentorship. So in my last year of university, I remember my professor really pushing me to see how do I integrate mobile transfer or mobile technology into the 4th year project that I was working on. And that is, so most of the lessons that I learned is what I carried on to my business. So I will say it's the mentorship and really people looking at the potential that you have and pushing you to reach your potential. And that is what encouraged me as an entrepreneur. And also the environment of like-minded people. So we were lucky, yes, the Innovation Hub had come up and all these incubators were coming up in Kenya at the time. That was around 2010 when MFAM started. And you don't have to get, the greatest minds are not always in the hubs or the incubators.
Yep.
You will find them in different places. You just have to create an environment that allows great minds to come together. I mean, the Chicago Council is already doing that through convening us.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what
Yeah.
is happening.
Yeah.
And also you find that people who are really great thinkers and they want to solve a problem, they attract other people. So how do we support them to be able to attract really great minds and then carry on an agenda forward? So I will say, like for instance, the Senegal government is attracting someone like him, giving him money and giving him the responsibility to actually invest in different sectors, looking at youth livelihoods. And that is what I would like to see most governments and most leaders to do. So how do you see potential? How do you invest that potential and that talent and attract more people to really push the agenda forward? So I would say I've been lucky enough to be around really great people. I keep attracting more people, and that is what has helped my business to move forward. I mean, when I look at the people who have invested in MFARM, they really saw potential in the co-founders, all the 3 women who actually started the business, and they invested in us. They invested their time, and there are more people who are actually trying to see how can I invest in more of these ideas. How are we moving forward? I mean, right now we've reached over 30,000 farmers.
Wow.
Yes, it's not perfect. Oh Lord, it's
No, can you
not.
talk a little bit about your
Yes.
success? Because I think it's impressive.
So the whole idea really has been how do we connect farmers to the markets? I mean, that's how we started off by looking at the supply chain, the agriculture supply chain is really infested with the middlemen. They're taking advantage of the farmers, and so we thought to ourselves, why don't we use our skill in mobile technology? Development to be able to enable the farmers to trade directly to the markets. But we actually, as we moved forward, especially towards our 3rd year, we realized the middlemen actually have a role that they're playing. They just need to do it more efficiently. And we realized that as we're connecting farmers to the markets, there has to be smarter and intelligent ways in which they can be able to make decisions. And that is where we are. Having reached that over the number of people or the number of farmers that we have reached, we want to enable them to make decisions. And that is how we are going to help them trade directly with the markets. I mean, there's a lot of human intervention in between the supply chain. But we want to be able to move to a point where, in as much as we have collection centers, aggregation centers, managing logistics and fulfilling orders, we want to see that farmers can be able to identify locations where they drop off their produce and work with the market directly. And we can only do this through data. And one of the things that I'm also pushing the governments around Africa to be able to do is to give us access to that data, so that more and more farmers can make decisions, and also how, if we are contributing to this data, how is it being made available to not only the 30,000 that we're working with, how can we work with 1 million or 5 million more farmers?
Yeah.
So that is the kind of enabling environments that I would like to see more. So the challenges that we have faced, some of them are around team,
Sure.
finding really great people to work with. Some of them are also around policies, For instance, let me give an example. I'm really focused on the Irish potato value chain, because if I get the Irish potato farmers, I will be able to get all the high value horticultural crops. And you find that the consumers of processed potatoes actually import the chipped potatoes. So you find the likes of KFC and others who actually import, and yet we have capacity in the country to process this produce. But because of either issues around taxation, when food is moving from one county to the other county, so there's a fee that is charged, making the potato more expensive than it should be, actually, in actual sense. And I do not see where that tax is going. I don't see how it's being consumed. So if I would have understood how it's contributing to make agribusiness more efficient or more friendly, then I will not have a problem. But I do not see where it's going. Yeah. So I would like to see more policies around supporting processing, which actually opens doors to more people getting employed. Because then if you're going to deliver the potatoes to the market or to the processor, there's a job for you.
Yeah.
If you are going to do the cleaning and disposing of the peels and feeding them to the pigs, there's a job there. There's pig production, because actually the pigs now have food, and then we have the processing of pork. I mean, it's a ripple effect. So how are we creating an environment that actually supports the local entrepreneurs to create jobs and with dignity? I know there were some photos that were being shown, but I don't know whether they can put them back on. I just wanted to show how, anyway.
Or when they
it's
come
okay.
up, we'll...
It's fine, they'll come up.
Yes.
But anyway, so some of the challenges I would say around policy, making sure that there is local value addition, and that in that way, we'll be able to create more opportunities and just make it less expensive to carry out agribusiness. And those are some of the challenges that I face because of the taxation, the policies that are making it difficult for the local businesses actually to exist. Yes, we have capacity. That's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I'll stay with you.
Okay, cool.
Because I think an interesting kind of area to discuss, I mean, you just talked about the Chicago Council. That facilitated our introduction. That's the first time you and I met,
That's true.
and to be part of the policy discussion that went into the report. Kudos to the council. But how do you think about more youth voice in the policy dialogues, in development dialogue more broadly? I mean, Papa and I were talking about that as well. I think you have a real challenge to that. You have a lot of experiences, a lot of interesting thoughts. How do you think about how we, the broad we, can do better at integrating kind of youth voices into policy design and decisions, both national and global?
I will say give more responsibility to the young, to the youth. Give them an opportunity to actually understand what it means to be in that position. I will say I've learned so much about myself through entrepreneurship. I've been blessed. I've been given the chance to really understand what my strengths are. I've been given a chance to discover what I really fail at and how I'm able to work with other people to support me in where I fail so that I can be very strong at what I'm good at. So give them responsibilities, and that is how we learn about ourselves earlier on. And it's through, as I say, finding a way of bringing people together who are really great or thinking in a particular, share a vision, let me say. People who share a vision, find ways in which you can bring them together. With the involvement with the Chicago Council, I will say thank you so much for recognizing at least people who are doing something about their situation through entrepreneurship, through leadership, maybe in government, or in various ways, even through education, like through the education institutions. Kudos for identifying those people and bringing them together and seeing how can we bring people in the different sectors to actually solve a particular agenda. you know. So I would say give more responsibility to the youth, and especially, let me just give an example. In African countries, we see a lot of investment in real estate and land, you know? Because it's the most certain, most sure thing that people feel that there is, you know? Land will forever grow in value, so let me just leave it there, invest, and keep quiet for the next 5 years. By the time I'm selling it, it will have quadrupled in price, you know? But then there is all this potential value to invest in. For instance, technology, young people who are coming up with their businesses. Yes, it's risky, but we have to start involving the young people to understand the language of investment. And I've seen this because I've been working in the Strathmore University. I've been working very closely with the Innovation Hub. And so what happens in the Innovation Hub, we have research that is commercialized, right? And in the process of commercialization, exactly what Papa and Rainer are trying to do is provide training, mentorship, and coaching, you know? And then what we are also trying to do is to set up a fund where young people who are either in second year, fourth year, come together, they're given a fund, let's say like if 200,000 USD, let them start to understand what it means. Let's put together like a group of a marketer, an expert in finance, and maybe an entrepreneur. Let the three of them come together and decide what kind of businesses do we want to invest in? What kind of research do we want to see commercialized? Are we making the right decision? Then when they start talking that way, we start moving away from real estate and investing in the potential, in great minds. You know, so that is when we talk about enabling environments and giving responsibility to the youth. This is the kind of conversation I'd like to hear. So when Papa and Mastercard and Kwame is looking at livelihood and really trying to focus on it, and you know, like put up a report that can help us to decide what to do as the next step. These are the kind of conversation I want to hear more about. You know, so let us support entrepreneurship and let us support dignity, especially in the youth employment and youth involvement in policy making. That's the only way that they'll realize the problems and then start contributing to policy making and executing it. In fact, at the moment in Kenya, I will say if we focus on any more policies, we can even start a whole business in government about policy because we have so much policy. I just don't see it being executed, you know? So it's only in the action, you know, in involving people in action that we're actually going to make a difference.
No, I mean, Papa, you know, I'm interested in, you know, I know it's just been since December, but take it from Linda's experience, which is more, I think, bottom-up organic in the Innovation Hub, and kind of pooling resources, and you're coming from a strategic direction from the president. But how have you found kind of youth entrepreneurs in Senegal, I'm sure, are now reaching out to you. I'd be reaching out to you with your $50 million and your own experience. How are you finding that process, and how are you thinking about that as you move on to deploy in terms of taking those voices in to impact your thinking?
Yeah, I think I want to come back quickly to a couple of things Linda said. The talent, it's key. When I returned home in 2015, I was working at the Ministry of Finance, so I realized the environment I was working in, it is not very attractive for youth and all that stuff. So in my new team, what I did an appeal on LinkedIn and all that stuff. So I hired like 40 people, like I would say 50% of it come from abroad. They're all age average 32, 35, engineers, agriculture, IT, energy, infrastructure, and then also bankers, investment bankers that will come into investing in the key sectors. And these, I want to recognize the talent and the people I have hired globally and to thank them for the work we're doing together over the last 2 months. And what is important, as Linda was saying also, is the leadership. The president decided it, but to implement it, we have to change the policies. And the way we do that is I'm working together with my former boss at the Ministry of Finance. Before the job, I was Director General for Financial Services, because we have to set a whole range of policies, from fiscal policy to be able to have the young entrepreneurs be able to, grow their business. Because what we realize with a census we've done is that the enterprises die after 3 or 6 months of existence because of tax burden and all of kind of stuff. So we're working to get a strategy that will allow entrepreneurs to have options of this.
And how do you think about the kind of the feedback from those entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs in terms of your thinking?
They love it. Last Thursday actually, the president gathered like 500 young people from around the country to do a digital economy conference. He was among the youth, I would say the geeks and the tech that would
No, but I mean, even you, can I just, if I'm a young person in Senegal, do I just tweet my views at you or DM you on Instagram? Like, how do you think about it?
Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn,
Yeah, and I just come at you directly?
Exactly.
Okay,
and
awesome.
we've set up a platform which is good. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want intermediaries because what
I'm trying to
happens.
give advice to the folks online who are ready. Yeah,
We don't want their dads, their moms, or the politician to come and be a intermediary between them and us. We
Yeah.
have set up a platform. It's www.der.sn. They all know it. They go online, they submit their projects. We process online. We reply to them up to 500,000 CFA, which is around $1,000 US dollar.
Yep.
There's no interaction between them and us. We process and we fund them directly, automatically. We would transfer to their mobile phone, etc. And we also are encouraging all of them to be together in groups in order to have more money and invest in the sector that they want to do. And lastly, what is important, Linda was saying, the dialogue between the youth and the politicians, or the elders, I would say. We want to do a kind of regular forum between the youth and the ministers and the president to be able to have their voice heard. I represent Senegal at the G20, the G20 and the G20 Compact with Africa. And also, these are the kind of messages I try to put on the table, telling them, use matter. You have to come to them, you have to support them, you have to give them opportunities, or they will come after you.
That's great. That's great. And Ariane, what are some of your experiences in terms of, within the projects, but in the broader context of kind of getting youth engaged in the policy making process?
Yeah, so when I think about youth engagement, I think about a quote from Francis Aranatwe, who was a young Ugandan speaker at the Foundation's Young Africa Work Summit. And his message was, youth need to be treated not just as beneficiaries, but as full partners in development. And what we feel that means is really meaningful and non-tokenistic participation in all stages of policymaking and programming. So in identifying the key problems, identifying possible solutions, in implementation, and then in feeding back about whether or not things are working. And at the Foundation, we really try to implement this across our programming. And one of our flagship efforts, which has been really successful, is the Youth Think Tank. And that is a collaboration with Restless Development, in which young sub-Saharan Africans between the ages of 15 and 24 are brought together, trained in research methods, and then they lead the research process. So they identify a core problem around youth unemployment in Africa. They carry out the research, including with other young people from their communities, and then they come back, they analyze the data, and they make recommendations, and then they disseminate those recommendations widely. And this has been really meaningful. Just internally, it's completely shaped our holistic model, how we approach youth engagement. And they're now in their third iteration, and they've actually just released a report called Building Youth Inclusive Technologies for Agriculture. So encourage everyone to check that out.
Kwame, do you want to add on the?
I think they've touched on most of the things that I was going to share, but I believe that if we are going to engage youth meaningfully, then we need to engage them on their own terms, as well as the use media that is culturally appropriate for the young people. And at this point, if you ask yourself, where are the youth? They are online.
Yep.
Yeah.
Majority of them are online. So that provides us a means to be able to reach out to young people and solicit opinions that will help shape some of the policy work that we are doing. And I think there's generally an increasing awareness that we need the ideas, the energies of these young people. Professor talked about what is happening in Senegal. I know that tomorrow, the Vice President of Ghana is meeting a group of young entrepreneurs. As part of their campaign promise, he wants to talk to them to find out how he can expand employment opportunities for young people. So creating more of those forums I do also know of the Youth Connect Forum, where young people, young entrepreneurs come together, they're able to share ideas with other young entrepreneurs, and also meet with policymakers to share some of the challenges that they have. Creating those kind of platforms for young people is really going to be a way for that meaningful engagement.
Well, I think we're talking about kind of online platforms, and I'm noticing on the screen we're getting a lot of questions from folks that are watching online, hopefully many of them young people, and we're getting a lot of questions about access to finance. And obviously everybody here represents something a little bit different in that chain in terms of access to finance and what are some of the barriers. I would say, and so I'm interested in everyone's view. I would say, Linda, something we heard a little bit yesterday in the discussions, and that you've brought up again, is this idea of mentorship. I can share from my experience that a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with, they get a lot of information online, which is so great today, and so much of the information online is about rounds of finance and is this a Series A and how am I packaging whatever I'm doing, which I think is great. But ultimately, I'm much more interested in what's the other help you need? What are some of the lessons you need? Yeah. What are some of the problems you're having that maybe I know somebody that had a similar problem? And kind of that. I mean, I'm not even sure mentorship even fully captures, that kind of engagement. And I actually find that to be the bigger piece than the finance, although the finance is the binding piece. And so you talked about that. It was talked about a bit yesterday. I feel like those things are kind of, when you hear people talk about finance, it's actually a bigger package. I mean, I'm interested in your views on that, but also just views on kind of the barriers to finance. Obviously, Pop, you're tackling that more directly and very specifically. But I'm interested in everyone's thoughts. I know we're getting close to the end, and on some of those barriers, but also whether it's more than finance a lot. Mm-hmm. Linda.
I think the greatest support that someone can give you is how do you earn revenue in your business? Mm. How do you actually just run a business? And the best test for that is the paying customer. Mm. Revenue is the biggest financial for any business. I will say personally, the reason why I'm yapping here about local manufacturing and my Irish potatoes, it's because I want revenue. Yeah. I want an environment that actually helps me to get revenue. And I will say if someone can help me and show me in their network how to work with someone, and in the next month I'm actually able to generate maybe 100,000 USD because I know I'm adding particular value that is of interest to me. I mean, that's why you bounce off ideas with your mentors or your coaches. But I also, for the young entrepreneurs, there's a lot to deal in strategy. You don't have all the experience. You don't know what it means to actually come up with maybe a financial model that has a 5-year, outlook. Mm-hmm. But, I have a vision, I have the drive. Yeah. So how do we work with people to actually help the young entrepreneurs to understand what it means to have a strategy, and we let the entrepreneurs to internalize it, understand it, and drive the strategy with someone who's experienced, and then it's up to them to execute because they have the drive, they have the passion, they want to understand their customers. And the biggest thing, of course, in terms of revenue is really understanding who your customer is and whether they have a problem or not.
They're willing to pay to solve it. Yes. Yes.
So, so I think it's show me how I can be able to generate revenue, or the best way to lay out a strategy and a foundation for revenue generation. And that's what I say at idea stage, pre-seed and pre-seed and pre-seed. I believe those are the critical stages. Yeah. Because majority of Africa, and I will say this is an example in Kenya, you find that most of the fund that is coming in is accelerator fund. But then you forget that it's in the foundation of the idea and the foundation of the company where the heavy stuff is. Yeah. So how do you help me to understand whether I'm solving a problem, whether I'm adding value into the system, so that acceleration just becomes like a very small effort.
So those are a combination of barriers in that early stage.
Exactly. It's the early stage which actually requires a lot of attention. And it's the early stage where you're interacting with the youth, helping them to figure out, what ideas do you have, what do you want to work on, and how am I helping you to establish the business. Okay. Finally, I will say the other challenge is, in as much as we're very excited in businesses and entrepreneurship being set up, let us avoid the issue about replication. I mean, it's in Kenya, I will say it's very easy to start a business. Today, I need 200 shillings. I will go and harvest my bananas, lay them on the ground, and then I'll walk away with 200 shillings at the end of the day, and probably I'll buy sugar, I'll buy something. I mean, the ease of doing business in Kenya is, I will say, good. I mean, there's the formal sector, which becomes a bit, I mean, there's challenges, there's the registration of the business, which has become easier because now we have an e-citizen platform to do that. But it's not really in the starting of businesses, it is in creating a structure that has sustainable value that is being added into the economy. That is what we need to focus on.
Okay.
So in as much as, I really wish those photos were being shown, because, so in as much as we see people setting up their businesses, maybe putting up like a banana vending something, we need to, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the 50 or the 6 businesses failing, because if out of 10 businesses, we have 9, we call them mamambogas, like the street vendors. You see, most of them are really running the same businesses side by side. Right? But what innovative value does that give us? Sorry, the time is up. What innovative value does that give us, you know? We need to come up with innovative businesses that actually solve problems. And the way to do that, it's in the foundation. It is not just to say, oh, it's easy to start a business, let us just put up a business, you know? There's nothing wrong with 10 businesses failing and 1 succeeding.
Right, thinking of a
because
bigger value.
The really good thinkers then join the one business, and then they help it to innovatively solve the problems. So how are we creating a structure where people are very innovative and they're actually running sustainable businesses? That is where the question is.
I mean, in terms of Linda's point, how are you think? Because you are starting at that very early stage, and obviously addressing what you see as a barrier in Senegal for these entrepreneurs. How do you see that?
The most important thing about the barriers for young people to get access to finance is the banking system do not trust yours.
Yeah.
That's the starting point. So where we want to focus on is to try to work with the traditional banking system, but also the microfinance institutions, to establish a partnership with them, to be able to trust the young people. We guarantee the funds. The youth borrow from them.
Interesting. We create that relationship now.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
So ultimately, at the end of the day, over the next 2 or 3 years, we expect to increase the financial inclusion, those people who have access to banking.
And a lot of learning for the bankers.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. That's the first point. The second point is we will set up a fund that will be a kind of capital risk. We will, take part of in their action, like equity. For instance, last week, when the president did that forum on the digital economy, he announced $1 billion CFA, around $1.5 million for the digital economy sector. So in the room, there were like 15 young startups, entrepreneurs that had their projects ready for around an average of $20,000 funding. And we took the decision to fund all of them. We will give them, all of them, $20,000 to $25,000 starting April 1st. And we will sit on their board, we'll monitor what they do, we'll try to add value, because we have IT people, so engineers in my team that will follow those sectors. We'll replicate the model for all these sectors, agriculture, craftsmanship, energy, and infrastructure, to be able to not only give them access to finance, but also give them financial literacy, but follow up on what they're doing over the next 3-4 years in order to make them a sustainable business, as Linda was saying. Right. This is key, and I will finish with what Kwame was saying. The internet and the mobile phone is a wonderful tool in Africa nowadays. Yeah. Alone in Senegal, we have like 95% of penetration rate for mobile phones. So the young people are online, WhatsApp, Facebook, all you name it. I don't want to do publicity, but those young people have direct access to their phones, and whatever you do, you interact with them. And finally, the example Linda did, I will send people in Kenya and Rwanda to learn from what you guys are doing. But we have something called Mluma and Sodatul, where young people in rural areas have access to markets and sell their crops, their products on a daily basis without having intermediaries and raising costs.
No, it's. I think we've heard a lot about kind of all these innovations, and for me, this is the beginning of the conversation. I mean, I know this is a carry-on from the task force. I look forward. I mean, I know we'll all keep talking in the hallway and online. I know there's also a lot happening on Twitter. I hope folks will join me in thanking the panelists. I think it's an interesting discussion. I look forward to continuing for the rest of the day.